Good evening, I'm Adrian Arsenault.
And I'm Andrew Chang. Tonight, just in time for the holidays, more change for travelers.
I just really wish they would, find a set of rules and just stick with them so that people can get back to doing normal things.
As the reality of Omicron sets in, the U.S. changes the rules. What you need to know if you're flying south this winter.
A teen hockey player faces racism on and off the ice.
I was just there to play hockey, and then people just had to ruin the experience for me.
The calls for action and the NHL superstar reaching out.
How a 100-year-old diary entry has a Regina gallery reviewing where some of its collection came from.
There's definitely mixed emotions, proud that we could take these steps, and then also that feeling of regret and shame.
And
fly ball left center. Gone!
How baseball's off-season lockout could change the game this season. This is The National. After months of progress and right on cue for the holidays, there is growing uncertainty tonight about where the COVID-19 situation is headed.
Omicron is forcing a shift in strategy from governments here and elsewhere. Tonight, how some of those shifts affect you. Today, the U.S. announced it is tightening its airport testing rules, making it that much harder for Canadians to fly in. While here, provinces and territories are expanding their booster shot programs.
So we'll look into those third shots in a moment. But let's start off with those new U.S. travel restrictions kicking in on Monday. Here's Aaron Collins on what they mean for COVID-weary Canadians hoping to fly south.
It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas at Calgary's airport. One of the busiest travel seasons of the year ramping up again.
Very, very excited to get out of the country into the warm weather and explore again.
But air travel is anything but normal this holiday season. News today that vaccinated Canadians flying to the U.S. will now need a negative COVID test within 24 hours of takeoff, down from 72.
I just really wish they would, find a set of rules and just stick with them.
A move the U.S. says is needed to slow the spread of the new Omicron variant.
This tighter testing timetable provides an added degree of protection as scientists continue to study the Omicron variant.
Despite those new measures, experts in the U.S. insist it's safe for vaccinated people to travel over the holidays.
Enjoy the holidays indoor with your family in a family setting. Many of us will have to travel during the holidays. What you do when you travel, you take care, you're prudent.
Even so, today's new rules are one more hurdle for Canadians hoping to fly south this winter.
It's hard for us to make a decision, but we both know that time is of the essence.
If you are looking to book a flight to the U.S., some advice from an industry trying to get back off the ground.
Wait until we know more. That's what I would tell them. Or if they're going to book something that they're going to get full refundability on.
Fully vaccinated Canadians looking to drive to the U.S. won't be impacted by today's changes. They still don't need a COVID test at all to enter. But if you're leaving for more than 3 days, well, those travelers need one to get back. But some worry that all of that could change too.
I would hate to have to cancel my travel plans. However, I would rather know ahead of time that this is what I need to do.
So change is in the air for travelers heading south to the U.S., but so far at least no sense that those heading from the States to Canada will need a negative COVID test just 24 hours before they fly. Aaron Collins, CBC News, Calgary.
And today, Ontario followed Alberta by expanding booster shot eligibility, in its case to anyone 50 and up. Vicadopia examines that strategy and what it might or might not mean for taking on Omicron.
We've been here before. The holidays approaching, a new variant, and worries about rising cases. This time, there are hopes more people will be better protected in Ontario.
I'm pleased to announce that we are expanding our COVID-19 vaccine booster dose eligibility.
Any allergies to medications?
In 2 weeks, Ontarians 50 and up will be able to book their third shots to prevent waning immunity against the dominant Delta variant.
I do hope and wish that it gives us also protection against Omicron, but I have to be completely honest that we don't have the science to make that statement yet.
The news from Ontario adds to a quickly shifting map in Canada. Aside from high-risk groups, officials are telling people of all different ages to get ready for their third shots. And some provinces and territories deciding to boost younger people don't have high rates of active cases. Israel was among the first to expand its booster campaign, prompted by a rise in hospitalizations among middle-aged vaccinated people. But not everyone sees the need for boosters for younger populations.
In Canada, there is no data that those folks have significantly waning immunity at this point. And so then the question is, why are you boosting people? This does not make the vaccine have superpowers to get an additional dose.
Others think the best strategy is a cohesive one.
I would love to see that more uniform across the country and recognize that if we're only giving boosters to part of the population, the other part could then still get infected and then potentially still perpetuate.
The official recommendation from NACI, the National Advisory Committee on Immunization, is booster shots for people 70 and up. But with provinces eager to boost more of their population and concerns about Omicron, expect new guidance from NACI, which could come as soon as tomorrow. Vic Adopia, CBC News, Toronto.
Today in Germany, it's not travelers feeling squeezed by new rules, it's the unvaccinated. German leaders have agreed to essentially bar them from much of public life as COVID spreads more quickly. In just a month, the 7-day average of new daily cases there has roughly doubled to more than 57,000. And Germany has one of the lowest vaccination rates in Western Europe at just under 69%. Margaret Evans shows us the extent of the new restrictions and what might be next.
In a Bavarian hospital struggling under the weight of coronavirus patients, intensive care workers turn on red lights at night, a message they want Germans to take heed of. The government in Berlin is delivering messages too, upping the pressure on Germans who have yet to take up the vaccine against the virus. A number of German states already bar the unvaccinated from public venues, including shops, cinemas, and restaurants, even public transport in some cases. German Chancellor Angela Merkel, in one of her last acts in the role, says those restrictions will now apply right across the country. Access to leisure, sports, and cultural activities, she says, will be limited to those who are vaccinated or have recovered. The German parliament will debate mandating vaccines, potentially following in the footsteps of Austria, which has pledged to start in February. And Greece will enforce them with fines for citizens over 60. The issue divides Germans. We need it, otherwise we won't get anywhere, says this woman. I think everyone should decide for himself, says another woman. Germany has one of the lower vaccine uptakes in Western Europe, and it's in the midst of a serious COVID upsurge. Deaths are now averaging about 300 a day, putting pressure on hospitals. In Brussels, the European Commission has also raised the issue of mandatory vaccinations.
This needs a common approach, but it is a discussion that I think has to be led.
It's not just numbers driving the decisions, of course, it's also fear over the potential impact of the Omicron variant. Margaret Evans, CBC News, London.
Well, Ottawa has set a date for its next update on federal finances.
We know it's important to Canadians that we are careful and transparent with our nation's finances. That's why I'm pleased to announce that I will be giving an economic and fiscal update to Canadians on December 14th.
Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland will deliver the update just 3 days before MPs are set to leave Ottawa for the winter break. Now, many people will be watching for a plan to address rising inflation rates, including Rosie and the At Issue team. They'll break down the ongoing debate over the cost of living a little bit later.
Today, a team of lobbyists made its way to Washington on a mission to deal with several tricky trade issues that have big implications for some Canadian industries. Katie Simpson was there and shows us these issues aren't exactly top of mind for U.S. lawmakers.
Minister Ng, what's your message to the Americans today?
Hi, Katie. Well, it's Canada's trade minister is on an urgent mission with a fast-approaching deadline.
I'm going to stand up for Canadian automotive sector.
Mary Ng and her delegation worked Capitol Hill, pleading with U.S. lawmakers to either change or scrap a proposed electric vehicle tax credit that could potentially kill thousands of Canadian manufacturing jobs.
We're going to keep Canada on the top of mind of senators as this bill makes its way through the Senate.
No holds barred. We're pushing as hard as we can to draw attention to this problem.
The minister called in seasoned diplomats and asked opposition MPs to help out too.
We are here doing what we can to help the government make sure we do things that impact Canada in a positive way. So we'll save the partisan fighting for back in Ottawa, and we do that quite heartily in the House of Commons.
Canada did find support among some Republicans.
They've got a very good reason to be concerned. This bill that is being proposed has many deep flaws. They've highlighted a number of them for me.
Do you support getting rid of the EV tax credit?
I support getting rid of this bill in its entirety.
We've had some.
Though other lawmakers seemed completely unaware of Canada's concerns.
I'd say the response that we're getting initially is thank you for bringing this to our attention, and let's stay in touch on this.
Democrats want to pass the bill before the Christmas break. With no sign anything will change in Canada's favor anytime soon, pressure is building on the minister to find other ways to break through.
Ideas are coming forward, and we're keeping everything. We're going to keep everything on the table as we must.
If Canada thought it would find an easy partner in President Joe Biden, that illusion is over. The tax credit is just one of several trade irritants, from softwood lumber to P.E.I. potatoes to the Line 5 pipeline. All of it is causing distress at the moment. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
British Columbia is catching its breath today with a weeks-long deluge of giant rainstorms and catastrophic flooding finally over.
The worst weather now appears to be behind us, and I think we are all grateful for that.
Although many areas of the province remain under flood warnings, river levels are still high, could rise further with warmer temperatures melting snow, and some major highway routes are still closed, though a big one is now open again, the Trans-Canada Highway east of Abbotsford. We also do now have a better idea of the terrible toll the floods have taken on livestock. Officials said today more than 640,000 animals have died.
Quebec's coroner will investigate the death of a Quebec man in a small rural community after he faced delays for medical help his family are convinced contributed to his death. And as Alison Northcott explains, many are blaming recent cuts to the town's emergency medical services.
Richard Genet's family is convinced his death could have been prevented. His brother Jean says if the emergency room in his town had been open overnight, it could have made all the difference when his brother woke up with worsening stomach pains. Instead, he says Genet called an ambulance to take him elsewhere, but the area's only one was on another call. It took more than an hour for a different ambulance from another area to reach him and take him to a hospital nearly 70 kilometers away. There, he was assessed and sent to a second hospital another 70 kilometers away for emergency surgery, but he died before the operation.
2 days before he died, he spoke to me at the grocery store.
Santerre's mayor says the town's clinic stopped overnight emergency services in October because of a shortage of staff.
We feel like nobody's taking care of us. I mean, we're alone. We're working hard to try to find solutions.
There have been protests against that overnight closure, and residents have been worried about the impact.
A lot of people here are sad, but they're also angry. It's like, I told you so. We knew that, that it was going to happen. And who's next?
L'arrivée de ce patient-là au CLSC de Sainte-Terre.
But the local health authority says even if that nearby emergency clinic had been open, it would not have had the tools to save Genet, given the seriousness of his condition. Now, the coroner's office is investigating, and Quebec's premier says that's an important step. He says his government has also had more than 100 requests for additional paramedics in communities across the province.
We may have other problems, and I'm happy to see that we'll have all the information.
Jean Genet says it feels like his brother's death is collateral damage, and he wants answers too. Alison Northcott, CBC News, Montreal.
An Edmonton police officer will receive a fine after being convicted for assaulting an Indigenous man in 2019. The incident was caught on video. You can see Constable Michael Partington driving his knee into the back of Elliot McLeod as he lays face first on the sidewalk. A judge called the blow deliberate, but stressed it did not cause bodily harm, so no jail time was warranted. Partington will have a criminal record and will have to pay a $2,000 fine.
A teenage hockey player says he was the target of racist slurs during a recent tournament on Prince Edward Island. The incident is now under investigation, and as Kayla Hounslow explains, the teen is getting support from one of hockey's biggest stars.
Mark Connors is a goalie for the Halifax Hawks minor hockey team. He's 16 and has been playing since he was a young child. 2 weeks ago, it got ugly.
Those players, they were calling me the N-word. Oh, this is a white man sport. You shouldn't be playing.
Those comments came after the game was over, back at the hotel. But Connors says he also heard that word from fans in the stands.
That made me feel pretty bad, honestly, because I was just there to play hockey, and then people just had to ruin the experience for me.
And it's happened before. Connors first heard that word from an opposing player when he was just 12 years old.
I like to say to the kids, educate yourself. These words are very hurtful, and it doesn't belong in our sport at all.
Hockey P.E.I., the governing body for organized hockey on the island, says it is investigating and that the process will be thorough, but due to its complex nature, may take some time.
We didn't feel that we are necessarily qualified to deal with something of this complexity, so we've obtained the services of a third-party investigator out of another province.
I have to say, we're a little disappointed at the pace of P.E.I.'s response up to now.
700 players of all ages wear the Hawks uniform. The organization says none of them will play on P.E.I. until the matter has been dealt with.
What we feel at the moment is that for our players to travel to a tournament in P.E.I., we're not totally sure that they will be safe.
Having faced racism himself, NHL star P.K. Subban tweeted his support, saying, "This is happening every day in our game. Hang in there, Mark." Subban is part of a campaign to make the game more inclusive.
Go back where we belong. This is where we belong.
It means the best. That's all it could really mean. It means the best thing, knowing I'm not going through this alone.
Connors wants the players involved suspended and educated. Kayla Hounslow, CBC News, Halifax.
Well, the head of the Women's Tennis Association spoke out again today against China and in support of star tennis player Peng Shuai. The organization is putting millions on the line with a pretty bold stance. Until China proves that Peng is free, the WTA will pull tournaments out of the country. But as Chris Reyes shows us, the organization stands alone.
This is a decision about what's right and wrong.
The head of the Women's Tennis Association doubling down on the costly decision to pull their game out of China.
It's not a decision that can be influenced due to the business or the dollars or the politics that may be associated with it.
Last month, Peng Shuai accused a high-ranking Chinese government official of sexual assault, describing in detail her pain in a social media post. Minutes later, the post disappeared, and for weeks, Peng was nowhere to be found online or in public. This video released by Chinese state media and this photo posted by the International Olympic Committee last month were meant to quell concerns, but
it's been great to confirm that she's in Beijing, and she does not appear to be in any physically harm's way. That's all terrific. Does it change my position that what we're seeing is orchestrated? No.
The choice to pull out of China will cost the organization potentially hundreds of millions of dollars. There are about 10 WTA tournaments annually in China, including the Tour Finals.
Just 100% orchestrated. I can only imagine the range of emotion, feelings that she's going through.
The International Olympic Committee's stance is very different.
She's fine, and she's not under any kind of coercion or confinement.
When the IOC released that photo, a statement said Peng and President Thomas Bach spoke for 30 minutes, and she said she was safe and well. The IOC says it will continue its quiet diplomacy with China on the matter. This Olympic watcher says he's not surprised, as the Beijing Olympics are around the corner.
The IOC has always
tried to distance itself from any kind of political confrontation with the host.
So far, still no public appearance from Peng. Her last WTA tournament was in Qatar early this year. Chris Reyes, CBC News, New York.
A Regina gallery is reviewing hundreds of artifacts after discovering one of their pieces was stolen from India.
The root causes was colonialism and racism.
Coming up, we head into the vault at a gallery questioning its collection. Plus,
we have an inflationary crisis and a housing supply shortage. Why doesn't the Prime Minister have a plan to get houses built?
Conservatives are going after Trudeau over inflation. Who's to blame for rising prices? Rosie and the At Issue panel are here, but first.
Fly ball left center. Gone!
Why an off-season lockout could change Major League Baseball this spring.
The sides need to realize what they are doing to their industry is they're going to destroy it.
We're back in 2.
At midnight last night, Major League Baseball team owners locked out their players. It's the first work stoppage in nearly 30 years in the sport. At issue, big money. But as Jamie Strachan shows us, there might be a big price to pay with an already dwindling fan base.
Fly ball left center.
With one of the most exciting young teams in baseball, Blue Jay fans were already looking forward to what next season might bring on the field. Not so fast.
We understand it's bad for our business.
More than a quarter century of labor peace was shattered at midnight when the baseball owners locked out the players, queuing off what could be a lengthy work stoppage.
The sides need to realize what they are doing to their industry is they're going to destroy it.
Baseball historian Lou Schiff says there's little public patience for a protracted battle between millionaires and billionaires.
If one party wins and plants the flag and say, hey, look, we won, they may turn around and look and say, where did everybody go?
Fans may wonder how this could happen in a sport seemingly awash in money. Already this offseason, owners handed out $1.7 billion in new contracts. The Jays were part of the frenzy. After losing 2 stars, the team committed more than $100 million to pitcher Kevin Gausman. So what's wrong? A central issue is free agency. Players say they should be allowed to go to the highest bidder earlier in their careers, something the league says would hurt small market teams.
It's also bad for fans in those markets.
For baseball fans in Montreal, it brings back bad memories. In 1994, the players' strike ended the World Series hopes of the Expos. At the time, the best young team in baseball, they never got a chance to compete. This time, while spring training is still months away, the stoppage has an impact, halting things like player rehab and ticket sales.
Fans, by and large, don't care about the issues as much as they care about seeing their teams play. So they've got time now to work these issues out, and there are many of them between now and spring training.
If they can't, it would do irreparable damage to a game already fighting for relevancy on a busy sports landscape. Jamie Strachan, CBC News, Toronto.
Coming up, Britain gets a gift for which it doesn't seem very thankful.
And I just feel it's not full enough. It looks a bit sparse. Sorry.
The internet is no doubt reacting strongly to this tree, but we speak to a man who left his birthday party to defend it. But first, Rosie's here with That Issue. Hello, my friend.
Hey, Adrienne. Tonight we're going to talk about the political debate about inflation, whether it is picking up steam inside and outside of Parliament.
If this Prime Minister is not to blame, then exactly what is causing this housing price inflation?
What this could mean for the government, Chantal, Andrew, Althea, and Elamine will join all of us to talk about that after this.
We have an inflationary crisis and a housing supply shortage. Why doesn't the Prime Minister have a plan to get houses built?
We will take no lessons from the Conservative Party of Canada when it comes to investing in housing.
If this Prime Minister is not to blame, then exactly what is causing this housing price inflation?
One has to at least recognize that the Conservatives are consistent in their approach and that they want to do less whenever they're confronted with a problem.
Lots of talk this week about housing and inflation because it continues to dominate the political debate. Is this a preview of more of what's to come, and what do Canadians actually want or need to hear? It's Thursday. I'm here with At Issue, Chantal Hébert, Andrew Coyne, Althea Raj, and Elamine Abdul-Mahmoud joins us this week too. So this is, the first week and a bit now we've been back, and I know we have talked about inflation, but it does seem to still, at least for the Conservatives, they're trying to make this sort of the dominant issue inside the House as well. Andrew, you've written a lot about it. I know you like to talk about it. What do you make of how the Conservatives are using it and how the government's responding?
Well, the Conservatives are using it, I think, partly because polling will show that people are extremely concerned about it. People don't like inflation. They find it unnerving. And the higher it gets, the more unnerved they get. The government, I don't think, has a good answer, but I don't think the opposition has a really clear questioning line either on this. It's one thing to talk about what we should do next, and it's very clear that the Bank of Canada has to act now to prevent this sort of beachhead of inflation from spreading, from becoming entrenched, becoming embedded in people's expectations, and particularly starting to show up in wage demands. And the government, in terms of its fiscal power, the deficit can do a lot to sort of buttress that credibility by starting to bring the deficit down. That's all well and good, but what Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives are talking about is what's happened over the last 18 months. And they're blaming all of the inflation that we've seen on government monetary and fiscal policy. That's much less clear that that's at fault. And what's really unclear is what they would have done differently. Would they not have run the deficits that the government did? Would they have prevented the Bank of Canada, or did they disapprove of the Bank of Canada having helped to finance that? They don't really seem to talk about that a lot. And I think that's the weakness in the Conservative argument.
Yeah, Althea, though, I wonder if it is resonating, though, because this is something that people feel and are talking about around the dinner table and everywhere else.
Well, it's hard not to notice it when you go to the grocery store or when you fill up your car at the gas pump, or even if you're addicted to realtor.ca like I am, and you notice that, yes, it's true. The prices of homes have gone up 18% year over year. I agree entirely with what Andrew said. I think what is interesting is that the Conservatives themselves are not actually sure. They know they want to hit on inflation. They know people are worried about it, but they're not sure what their lines of attack are. So last week, it was all about the price of food, and then the government's response was, well, these are global supply chain problems, and this is not something that Canada itself is experiencing alone. And now it's all about, well, it's the price of land that has gone up, as if the price of homes is entirely due to the fact that the government sent CERB to almost everybody across the country. So to Andrew's point, and I think he's right, the Conservatives don't have a clear answer. What is it that you would do differently? And not just what would you have done in the past differently, but what would you do in the future differently? And even that itself is not clear within the Conservative caucus as well.
Yeah, they're sort of shifting their talking points and their targets a fair bit. Elamine, what do you make of how the government is responding by talking about things like housing and childcare?
I mean, listen, one thing that keeps popping up, for example, on TikTok is that there are global supply problems that are causing, goods to go up. So I feel like that's something that at this point, even the Conservative Party is fairly familiar with. One thing that they're not addressing is the fact that their platform itself also promised to spend quite a bit of money. So if they're going to come after the Liberals for, increasing inflation by spending a lot, then the one thing that doesn't add up is like, well, so that was also your plan. In fact, your plan was to run a higher deficit. And that is something that they're not answering yet. I assume that's why they can't keep hitting on this note. It is a note that people are feeling right now when they're trying to buy Christmas presents and everything is costing a little bit higher. But at no point have they explained how, the government's supposed to make it rain in Brazil or something, like open some ports that are currently closed. And of course, because they can't answer that question.
Chantal, what do you make of how this argument is evolving?
Well, it's a global issue, and I'm not talking about inflation. I'm talking about opposition tactics. It's not just happening in Canada that the government in place is being blamed. Today, I think Joe Biden was saying, well, look at inflation in Canada and Europe, which sounded like a line from question period. I think the Conservatives are taking a gamble in the sense that they are playing the long game. We're not going to have an election tomorrow. We don't know how the economy is going to turn out 6 or 8 months from now. One thing for sure, the government is not going to be resolving inflation from the exchange you played before we started by building houses, because houses don't get built overnight. But that is a gamble that they're taking. And in as much as there are many levers at play that the federal government has no hands on, it's a fair gamble to take for an opposition party. Take wage increases. If you're going to have labor shortages, you are going to see wage increases. And the federal government cannot suddenly bring in armies of workers to prevent that. It's already happening. So I would say let's check back on this in about 4 or 5 months.
Althea, I'll give you the last word on this.
I think the risk for the government is that it gets wrapped up in these discussions that are more theoretical and philosophical and policy discussions, and they don't sound like they're connected to real people. And so they cannot forget when they're answering questions from the Conservatives on this issue that they have to show empathy, because people are actually concerned. And this is not about whether or not you should like for real people, it's not about lowering the debt or the deficit. It's about, well, the fact that broccoli is costing $5, and when the Chrystia Freeland, who's answering these questions, kind of takes a condescending tone, I think that is a win for the Conservatives.
And that's the danger here. Of course, there is a fiscal and economic update coming. We learned today on December 14th, so maybe that'll give us a picture too. We're going to take a quick break, but we're going to come back with another round of all of them and a look at this moment of unity in the House of Commons.
I think political people in this country do not want to be on the record anymore opposing LGBTQ2 issues because they're fundamental human rights.
How the ban on conversion therapy came to pass, that legislation, unanimously, and the politics behind it. That's coming up.
All those opposed to the motion will please say nay. There being no dissenting voice, I declare the motion carried.
A rare moment this week inside the House of Commons after MPs unanimously voted to fast-track the government's updated bill banning the practice of conversion therapy in Canada. So what does this tell us about how Parliament can work together? What were the politics at play behind the scenes? Chantal, Andrew, Althea, and Elamine back for another round of At Issue. I'll start with you on this one, Chantal. The Liberals and the NDP were both caught off guard that this happened. And obviously it was welcome from those two sides. What did you make of how this unfolded and maybe what was the motivation politically behind it?
I think it was a smart play on the part of the Conservatives, and up to a point a risky one. A similar bill last spring, as you remember, saw 62 Conservative MPs vote against, and it was a lighter bill, to 51, including Aaron O'Toole, voting for it. So the risk to the Conservatives is that they moved the notion that all this should happen in one day, and that could not have happened unless everyone agreed. And so the risk was it only took one person to kind of trip up Aaron O'Toole and his caucus on this. And we would be talking about that today. So that kind of shows a caucus unity in a way that I think no other party in the House of Commons expected from the Conservatives. For one, the main argument for why that happened, there were a number. The first is a lot of people have had their say in the Conservative caucus over conversion therapy last spring. The second, this battle has been fought and lost. It will be lost in the end. Strangely enough, I think the third reason, the bill is tougher. The previous bill did not include consenting adults. It bans conversion therapy entirely. This version probably opens the bill up for legal challenges that the previous one did not, and that battle will be fought or lost in the courts. Finally, the way this happened yesterday, no one had to vote in a way that went against how they voted last spring. The only thing you needed to do was, I'm trying to say this politely, keep your lips zipped.
Which is hard for politicians. So, and especially if you feel passionately about this, and many Conservatives do. Althea, did it surprise you too that Aaron O'Toole managed to get everybody to agree to this, or to keep it quiet, as Chantal says?
I think it was politically astute Is it surprising? Yes. It's not as surprising when you start actually talking to members of the Conservative caucus. So they obviously talked about this on Wednesday. The bill, yes, is tougher, as Chantal mentioned, in that consenting adults, so the state is telling you that you cannot do something, even if you want to do it, is preventing you from accessing this so-called service. But one of the concerns that the pro-life members of the Conservative caucus had was that they felt that the language was vague about whether or not you could have a discussion with your priest or counselor. And actually, the Liberals tightened that language to causing another person to undergo conversion therapy. So for some, they felt that that concern was actually addressed. So while the Liberals have been using this bill as a wedge issue for the past year, and were really, I mean, let's be frank, they were hoping to use it against the Conservatives again. I think what this shows is that actually the bill gave them an olive branch and they've latched onto it. And also that Aaron O'Toole has a very firm grip on his caucus.
Elamine, what did you make of it from Toronto there?
I mean, it's certainly a really elegant way for Aaron O'Toole to change the channel on the questions about his leadership and how, firm a grip he has on the rest of his caucus. There were questions as recently as a couple of weeks ago about whether he would be able to sort of convince his caucus on a few issues in terms of bringing the party closer to the middle, which is where he would like it to be. This is exactly the test case for it. And the fact that there are no headlines, or at least like very few headlines, even mentioning any opposition inside the Conservative Party with regards to this issue, like that's the win. That's the win, is the fact that they changed the channel, at least on that front.
Yeah, the headlines were positive for the Conservative Party today, and it, as Chantal pointed out, it didn't have to go that way. Andrew?
Anytime you see unanimity in Parliament, it usually means that somebody's decided to punt some of the legal issues. So yes, there will probably be constitutional challenges of this coming up, and you had an alignment of expediency and principle behind this bill. I think it's interesting to pair this with our previous discussion about the economy and inflation. And I think I'll come back to a point I made in the previous panel. I think what's going on in the Conservative circles is not just about Aaron O'Toole, it's about a critical mass within the party and within the caucus, where he had to give some concessions to the right wing of the party coming out of that election, coming out of his bouncing back and forth in terms of his own positioning. But the concession, I think the decision that's been made is, I'll give you more room on the right on the economy, but you got to cool it down on the culture war issues. If you want to have a more right of center party, you can do so on things like inflation and the deficit, but we're going to put some of these really divisive culture war issues that are losing issues to the Conservatives. We're going to put those to one side. And I think that's what you're seeing emerging with the Conservative Party.
Interesting last word to Chantal.
Oof. I'm not sure that giving in to going further to the right on fiscal issues is the best line to take if you're going to go in an election. But I'm guessing if you're fighting to save your leadership, it's not a bad move.
Okay, got to leave it there. That was a good one, everyone. Thank you for being here. Chantal, Andrew, Althea, and Elamine. And with that, I'll send things back to Toronto and to Adrian and Andrew.
Okay, thank you very much, Rosie. When we come back, a gallery in Regina questions where some of its collection came from.
There's definitely mixed emotions that we're all feeling here and now. Proud that we could take these steps, and then also that feeling of regret and shame.
We get access to the vaults next.
Today, the Catholic Archdiocese of Edmonton named 2 Métis delegates who will sit down with the Pope for a historic meeting at the Vatican.
I'm so happy, and I'm so grateful, and I feel so humble.
In just a few weeks, Inuit, Métis, and First Nations representatives will tell Pope Francis what they went through at the church's residential schools. Some delegates say they plan to seek an apology for the harm done to children who attended the schools. Saskatchewan's largest and oldest public art gallery is looking into the origins of hundreds of pieces in its collection after discovering one of its treasures was stolen from India, and the original collector left evidence of his own wrongdoing. Jason Warwick got a chance to take a look at the proof.
A visit inside the basement vault at Regina's Mackenzie Art Gallery is like traveling back in time.
So we're going to get one of Norman Mackenzie's ledgers here.
These century-old ledgers were dictated by Norman Mackenzie, the museum's namesake, and a world-traveling collector of art. Documents that were recently used to prove he stole this statue of the Hindu goddess Annapurna from a temple in India back in 1913. He then smuggled it back to Regina, where it remained until recently. Just last month, the museum returned Annapurna to India, where thousands welcomed it home during a regal multi-city tour.
There's definitely mixed emotions that we're all feeling here and now. Proud that we could take these steps, and then also that feeling of regret and shame.
The Annapurna revelation prompted the gallery to launch a wider investigation of its artifacts to find out if any other pieces were stolen by Mackenzie and need to be repatriated. One expert on Mackenzie says it's clear he didn't respect other cultures or peoples.
I suspect that Norman Mackenzie would probably ask me to shine his shoes. That was the social order back then.
Others say the gallery's investigation is part of a long overdue reckoning happening at galleries across North America and Europe over how some items were acquired.
The root causes was colonialism and racism. The belief being that we are not worthy of great art and that our cultures were not worthy. Therefore, we were open to be pillaged.
And now there are also questions about whether Mackenzie's name should even remain on the gallery he founded. But the first step is getting at the truth. Jason Warwick, CBC News, Regina.
Well, tonight in London's Trafalgar Square, the ceremony to light a special Christmas tree brings a timely reminder of what it means to give a gift and also to graciously accept it. Here's the view from the top of Canada House after the towering Norwegian spruce was lit up for the first time. Since 1947, Norway has sent the UK the gift of a Christmas tree as thanks for sheltering its king during wartime. But as before, this year's tree was greeted with some scorn.
It's not full enough. It looks a bit sparse. Sorry.
One vicious tweet declared, "Nothing says global Britain like a half-dead tree." But British artist Thomas Wolski sprang to the tree's defense.
In regards to people's sort of opinions of the tree, I said to my friends yesterday, I was like, oh, they poked the polar bear, meaning me.
He's found meaning in the story of the annual gift and wanted to travel to see the ceremony. After COVID, he thought now or never, so he was there 2 weeks ago when the 70-year-old spruce was felled and began its long journey.
You know, if you've been lying down for 2 weeks and suddenly had to stand up for attention, you probably need to fluff out a little bit yourself. Do you know what I mean?
Wolski says Norway's sincerity was clear to him.
I think people need to sort of, I don't know, just shut up and say thank you.
And away from Twitter in the square, tonight at least, some gratitude on display. Though I gotta say, even before knowing the backstory, I kind of think it's an adorable tree.
It's a fantastic tree.
And it's the thought that counts, right?
And Thomas is so proud of that tree that he got up and left his own birthday party to talk to us about it. So that is commitment. When we come back, a Quebec City legend lives on.
People would look at her and were fascinated by her.
A special homage to a Canadian style icon in our moment. Behold the great Henriette Belly, a woman who knew how to make an entrance. In the 60s and 70s, Belly was a seamstress, a fortune teller, and a staple at Quebec City's iconic music venue, Palais Montcalm. When she arrived in her extravagant gowns, the spotlight would follow her directly to her seat. So Belly died in 1980, but this week she became a permanent fixture when the Palais Montcalm named a performance hall after her. And that's our moment.
Well, Henriette Belly was a member of the audience. She was a kind of special member of the audience because she was at every premiere, especially here at Palais Montcalm. We had this new room. Why not, instead of naming this room after a great artist, why not naming it after a member of the audience? You know, she was a small lady. She was only 4'6", but you could not miss her, of course, because she was spectacular. And she will wear those, you know, incredible dresses and special outfits. It's not a concert hall. It's a small room. It's a cozy place, intimate place, and it's decorated the way we thought that would fit Henriette Belli. So there is mirrors, old mirrors, and there is a crystal ball because she was a fortune teller. People would look at her and were fascinated by her. It was wonderful. You know, it was full. The atmosphere was great. It was exactly what we wanted it to be.
How great to have been able to see her. She had 5,000 gowns and would arrive 1 minute before the performance, knowing the show wouldn't start without her.
But apparently, beyond the performance hall, she was actually quite a reserved person, just kind of stuck to her designing, her fortune telling, and that was it.
Amazing.
That's The National for this December 2nd. Have a great night.
Good night.